Nuclear odds in 2025. Closer than we think? What then are the actual odds of nuclear use in 2025? Not in cinematic terms of missiles filling the skies, but in the sober calculations of analysts who study arsenals, doctrines, and geopolitical stability. Some experts interviewed this year estimate roughly a 30% chance that at least one nuclear detonation will occur before the end of the decade. That figure does not stand alone. It reflects wider patterns that institutions like SIPRI and the Defense Intelligence Agency have tracked: expanding arsenals, collapsing arms control treaties, and increasingly unstable channels of communication between nuclear powers. The raw numbers are stark. SIPRI's January 2025 data estimates that the world's nuclear stockpile totals about 12,241 warheads. The United States and Russia hold roughly 90% of this figure, with several thousand deployed or maintained in ready status. This concentration preserves the logic of mutual deterrence, but also amplifies the risks if dialogue falters. During much of the Cold War, arms control agreements capped arsenals and guaranteed verification protocols. Today, many of those agreements have either dissolved or remain frayed, leaving modern states free to invest heavily in modernization and new delivery vehicles. That modernization is not stabilizing, it accelerates competition. While strategic warheads remain the backbone of deterrence, the most concerning development for many researchers is the rising prominence of so-called tactical nuclear weapons. These smaller devices, designed for use on battlefields rather than against entire cities, carry lower explosive yields but dangerous strategic implications. Military planners in both Russia and other nuclear-armed states have integrated them into scenarios where leaders might imagine a limited nuclear exchange could shock an adversary into backing down. DIA assessments repeatedly warn that this thinking erodes the taboo against nuclear use. Even one tactical detonation would still produce radiation, panic, and precedent for escalation. Once the barrier is crossed, there is little certainty that the use would remain limited. Proliferation among threshold states compounds these concerns. These are countries with the scientific expertise, fissile materials, or enrichment facilities to become nuclear powers quickly, depending on political will. In the Middle East, Iran continues uranium enrichment that nudges closer to weapons-grade capability, raising alarms from both Israel and Western intelligence communities. In East Asia, North Korea already demonstrates advanced missile platforms, while Japan and South Korea are debated at home for their latent capacity to build nuclear arms if necessary. In South Asia, Pakistan and India remain in a constant state of tension, with a disputed border that has historically seen frequent military standoffs. The reality is that nuclear dynamics have spread far beyond AU.S. Russia framework. The present landscape is multipolar, with many nuclear or near-nuclear states inhabiting regional rivalries where escalation decisions may be made under intense domestic pressure and short timelines. This multipolarity is accompanied by weakening trust in traditional deterrence structures. Hotlines between Washington and Moscow are less reliable now than at any point since the 1970s. Joint verification regimes have withered, with inspections suspended or ignored in the aftermath of diplomatic breakdowns. Without clarity surrounding capabilities and deployments, paranoia grows. In such settings, improvements in missile systems and defenses, hypersonic weapons, AI-driven command and control, satellite surveillance, do not necessarily reassure. They create new uncertainties about survivability. When an adversary fears that its response capacity could be wiped out in a first strike, the incentive rises to strike preemptively rather than wait. Command and control itself introduces fresh vulnerabilities. Nuclear forces now operate in an environment of cyber operations and contested space infrastructure. Critical communication links depend on satellites, fiber optic cables, and digital networks that are increasingly targeted by state-sponsor intrusions. DNI and DIA assessments caution that in the event of crisis, leaders may face incoming alerts distorted by cyber interference. A false indication of attack could compress decision-making to minutes or even seconds, especially if AI-driven systems reinforce incomplete data. The historical record already contains chilling examples of false alarms averted only through human judgment. Today, that margin of human judgment is shrinking. Against this backdrop, analysts stress that the likelihood of nuclear use is rising not because leaders suddenly want such a war, but because the surrounding environment makes accidental or opportunistic use more plausible. Tactical warheads lower the threshold. Threshold states expand the roster of possible flashpoints. Cyber and AI systems create more chances for misinterpretation. Weak treaties strip away the constraints that once bought time. And modernization projects accelerate arms races by constantly suggesting to rivals that survivability is at risk. Each factor is troubling on its own, but together they feed a climate where deterrence feels increasingly fragile. The possibility of non-strategic nuclear events also looms. While experts agree that most nuclear weapons remain under tight military command, concern is growing about so-called radiological devices or dirty bombs that could be assembled from compromised materials. Intelligence analysts note that such attacks would not carry the destructive yield of a nuclear weapon, but would still spread radiation, damage urban centers, and trigger nuclear-level panic across financial and political systems. These concerns remain speculative and less likely than state-based nuclear use, but they illustrate the wider range of nuclear-related risks that security communities now have to calculate. Here again, the lesson is less about specific scenarios and more about degrading safeguards. In 2020, expert estimates place the odds of a nuclear event this decade at closer to 15%. By 2025, some analysts now say 30% or higher, roughly double what was projected just 5 years earlier. They emphasize that these probabilities reflect compounding vulnerabilities rather than an inevitable countdown. The risk driver is not a sudden appetite for nuclear war, but an accumulation of conditions, doctrine, technology, alliances, and erosion of norms that make mistakes and escalations far more likely. For younger generations, the nuclear era often feels like history out of reach, a Cold War problem solved before their lifetime. But 2025 data shows the opposite. SIPRI's global stockpile figures are growing, not shrinking. Tactical nuclear integration has normalized, not remained hypothetical. Arms control has weakened, not strengthened. And the communication links that once provided safeguards are now thinner, more vulnerable to disruption. The assumptions that underpinned global nuclear stability for decades no longer hold with the same force. This is why security experts increasingly argue not only for modernization of arsenals, but for modernization of diplomacy, restarting arms control discussions, reinforcing treaties rather than abandoning them, and re-establishing reliable crisis communication channels. Arms buildups can create deterrence, but deterrence without trust in the systems that support it is brittle. The higher the number of nuclear powers, weapons, and technological complexities, the greater the incentive for miscalculation in moments of pressure. So when experts point to an elevated probability of nuclear use in this decade, they are not speaking in absolute terms. They are warning that the safeguards, norms, and communication systems preventing such use have eroded to a degree not seen since the early Cold War. And once weakened, these foundations are slow and difficult to rebuild. The measured takeaway is this: the nuclear landscape of 2025 makes the consequences of a single mistake far greater than before. Preserving and strengthening arms control, maintaining open dialogue even among rivals, and protecting the integrity of command and control networks are the strategies most frequently recommended to reduce risk. Deterrence still works, but it cannot survive without these supports. Understanding nuclear odds in this way also helps explain the wider shape of modern conflict. The gravest threats are not only tied to physical arsenals, but also to the technological and informational systems surrounding them. And as we shift focus beyond nuclear risks, it becomes clear that the most contested battlefields today are not only land or sea, but also invisible domains where data itself has become a weapon. The new battlefields, cyber and AI. Wars in 2025 increasingly unfold in places that cannot be located on a traditional map. They take shape across networks of code, fiber optic cables, and manipulated data streams. The most consequential front lines today are invisible, yet they can disable a city as effectively as any missile. Cyber operations and artificial intelligence, once auxiliary tools of statecraft, now function as primary battlefields. What happens in these digital arenas can disrupt economies, sever trust in political systems, or plunge societies into paralysis long before conventional forces even mobilize. This year has already demonstrated what that means in practice. Nation-scale cyber attacks in 2025 struck at power grids, hospitals, and financial platforms across continents. In earlier decades, such intrusions were treated as espionage or limited disruption. Now they are identified by agencies like the DIA as tools of coercion on par with economic sanctions or conventional strikes. A single ransomware campaign in January forced electrical substations in the United States offline, leaving metropolitan areas dependent on backup generators. DIA reporting also documented cyber intrusions on U.S. water utilities and healthcare payment processors, an escalation that moved beyond espionage into direct pressure on public health and infrastructure. Patients missed treatment, businesses halted, and entire neighborhoods waited in blackouts without knowing whether the source of the disruption was criminal syndicates or state actors. For civilians, the distinction hardly mattered. Society stopped functioning, and the effect was indistinguishable from a conventional strike. Attribution remains a central problem. Analysts may spend weeks debating whether a cyber event originated with a nation-state, a proxy network, or criminal groups posing as one or the other. This ambiguity is part of the strategy. Unlike a missile launch, which can be confidently tracked back to its origin, a digital strike can remain unattributed indefinitely. Major powers exploit this gray zone deliberately, delivering maximum impact while maintaining plausible deniability. As DNI notes in its 2025 reporting, the uncertainty deters decisive retaliation, since governments hesitate to escalate without clear proof of responsibility. That hesitation is what makes cyberspace a favorable battleground. Attackers act with comparatively low risk of consequence. Layered onto this reality is the integration of artificial intelligence. 2 decades ago, generating convincing propaganda meant deploying teams of writers, printers, or broadcasters. In 2025, AI tools scale the process instantly. Natural language and video synthesis models can construct narratives in dozens of languages simultaneously, producing tailored versions for specific demographics. DJ and DNI assessments this year confirmed adversaries are using commercially available AI to conduct influence operations, creating fabricated videos and news reports that circulate globally in hours. The information environment now allows malign actors to scale influence at a speed and volume previously impossible. By the time independent media or fact-checkers disprove one claim, millions have already accepted it as truth. The political impact has been visible across multiple elections held this year. While physical ballot boxes largely remained secure, the informational ecosystem around them was anything but. False scandals circulated online. AI-generated images portrayed candidates in manufactured compromising scenarios, and conspiracy narratives gained traction across social platforms before local regulators could intervene. Even after being disproved, the reputational damage lingered. Voters often went to the polls carrying impressions shaped by AI manipulation without realizing it. For adversaries seeking to tilt an election or destabilize faith in institutions, that influence costs little compared to the effects it delivers. The disruptive power of AI is not limited to disinformation. On kinetic battlefields, autonomous and semi-autonomous systems now play central roles. In Ukraine, for example, investigators in 2025 recovered Iranian Shahid-class drones containing Western-made NVIDIA processors, enabling autonomous navigation even when satellite links were jammed. The discovery confirmed what DI analysts had previously warned. Low-cost drones and imported technology now deliver capabilities that rival traditional platforms. Instead of precision strikes being tied to expensive national arsenals, they are proliferating at levels accessible to militias and proxy groups. The implication is sobering. The same AI-enabled functions that once demanded classified budgets can now be assembled from commercial parts. The economic theater mirrors these developments. Cybercriminal groups, some linked to state sponsors, routinely freeze logistics networks through ransomware. In one documented instance, this year, the attack on a multinational shipping provider forced rerouting of maritime cargo, delaying deliveries for weeks. The point was not merely ransom but strategic disruption. With minimal expense, attackers replicated the effect of a blockade. Analysts compared the outcome to 20th century bombing campaigns against factories, yet accomplished with software rather than explosives. The persistence of these campaigns is especially destabilizing. Conventional attacks come in surges. Cyber and ransomware strikes can disrupt indefinitely, producing an unbroken war of attrition at the digital level. Disinformation campaigns simultaneously destabilize governments far from front lines. One African capital learned this the hard way in early 2025. A deep-fake video appeared online of a senior minister making inflammatory remarks about an ethnic group. Within hours, the video spread through messaging platforms, sparking protests that spiraled into riots. By the time investigators demonstrated the footage had been fabricated by AI, dozens were dead, public buildings were damaged, and trust in local leadership collapsed. Such incidents exemplify a central theme of modern warfare. AI manipulation can unravel social cohesion faster than military attacks could. The accessibility of these tools is striking. Where traditional destabilization might have required billion-dollar intelligence apparatuses, a modestly funded group can now simulate those effects with rented computing power and AI toolkits. This democratization of disruption opens the field not just to hostile states, but to smaller actors, insurgent groups, and even politically motivated non-state movements. Intelligence agencies are more sophisticated than ever. They process enormous volumes of open-source data with tools unknown to their predecessors. Yet, as DNI acknowledges, the sheer speed and scale of AI-generated fakes has forced national security communities into catch-up mode. They cannot reliably debunk malign content before it shapes public narratives. For ordinary citizens, this reality changes the definition of risk. A person does not have to live under missile threat to experience the effects of conflict. A manipulated image can inflame tension inside communities. A blackout caused by ransomware can jeopardize food refrigeration or emergency services. Economic confusion can appear in bank accounts locked by cyber interference. For civilians, misinformation has become a weapon that moves populations, provokes unrest, and shapes political outcomes. The responsibility to practice media hygiene, checking sources, verifying claims, now matters for personal resilience as much as keeping emergency supplies does for physical preparedness. The theory of deterrence that guided earlier eras provides limited comfort here. Nuclear arsenals depend on the assumption of retaliation. A launch guarantees a counterstrike. Cyber and AI campaigns do not follow that pattern. Attribution remains murky, retaliation is uncertain, and adversaries gain advantage precisely because of that asymmetry. States hesitate to retaliate against a wrong actor, so in practice many cyber and disinformation strikes proceed unanswered. This culture of impunity emboldens attackers to escalate more aggressively, knowing that consequences are often far removed from the damage inflicted. The scale of disruption is measurable not just in elections or public sentiment, but in economics. Each ransomware campaign rearranges shipping routes. Each blackout amplifies financial shocks. Each AI-driven scandal alters political futures. And the tempo of these operations means that unlike conventional conflicts, there is no peacetime pause. Nations operate continuously in contested digital environments where the costs accumulate day after day. This recognition leads to one conclusion: cyber and AI are no longer auxiliary threats. They are the primary theaters through which states and non-state actors advance geopolitical goals. Case after case in 2025 makes this obvious. Deep fakes collapsing city order, drones using AI to bypass conventional defenses, ransomware striking utilities. Together, these developments prove that wars of the future, and increasingly of today, are conducted against systems of information and perception as much as territory. They do not wait for formal declarations, they shape conditions continuously. Recognizing these domains as core to modern conflict reframes how we understand security itself. Power no longer resides only in armies and arsenals, but in the ability to shape flows of information and disrupt economic lifelines. And that brings us to another battlefield that, like cyberspace, operates largely out of view: the struggle over resources, trade, and supply chains that now determine national survival. Economic warfare, sanctions, minerals, and supply chains. When people picture modern warfare, they often think of tanks rolling forward or aircraft striking targets. But by 2025, some of the most decisive struggles unfold in trade, resource markets, and supply chains. These battles do not leave burned-out vehicles on news footage, but they can stall entire economies, collapse industries, and shift the balance of power. Nations have realized that weakening an opponent no longer requires direct invasion. Instead, they can deny access to materials, technologies, and transit routes that global economies depend on. The critical front lines now often pass through ports, contracts, and shipping lanes. China's role in this type of conflict is pronounced. Its dominance in refining rare earth elements remains unmatched, with metals essential for electronics, renewable energy, and advanced weapons systems. Fighter jet engines, missile guidance units, and surveillance equipment depend on these inputs. By 2025, Beijing has expanded its control even further, deepening investments at home and securing new mines abroad, particularly across Africa. Evidence shows the strategy is not theoretical. In 2024, China restricted exports of gallium and germanium, both vital for semiconductors and military hardware, as a direct response to Western technology sanctions. This precedent demonstrated clearly how quickly supply restrictions could be weaponized to create pressure. SIPRI and other monitors warned that such actions provide Beijing with a coercive tool that rivals conventional deterrence, the ability to disrupt industries overnight. Semiconductors add another layer. Taiwan still manufactures the majority of the world's most advanced chips, but China has built a twin strategy, pursuing dominance over Taiwan's fabrication capacity while rapidly scaling its own domestic output for widely used, less advanced chips. The result is leverage across two categories: cutting-edge processors vital for advanced computing and mass-produced chips critical to everything from automobiles to household appliances. Analysts caution that these dependencies mean Beijing can use its role as supplier or disruptor as effectively as any naval blockade. A confrontation over these flows would reverberate instantly across the global economy. Russia applies economic leverage differently, focusing on energy. Europe continues to wrestle with the aftershocks of Moscow's decisions during the Ukraine war to manipulate natural gas deliveries. Pipelines that once symbolized stability and affordability became strategic bargaining instruments. By cutting flows during high-demand winters, Russia forced European states into subsidies, price spikes, and industrial slowdowns. DIA and SIPRI report stress that these moves were not incidental. They documented how the Kremlin treated energy as an extension of its strategic arsenal.